The Final Phase by Kevin Haralson. The final stage. The night air was thick, heavy with the weight of coming rain. He ran, breath sharp in his chest, feet striking the earth in a frantic rhythm. The sound of dogs carried through the trees behind him. Low snarls punctuated by the shouts of men. They were close. The branches clawed at his skin, tearing at the ragged clothes of his shirt. His back ached, the deep bruises from yesterday's work still fresh. But he pushed forward, swallowing the pain, focusing only on the stretch of darkness ahead. If he could make it past the ridge, find the stream, maybe, just maybe, he could disappear into the night. He had heard stories of those who had tried to run before. None of them had returned. "He's moving east! Cut him off before the checkpoint!" Checkpoint? Ain't no checkpoints in the wild, only the rivers and hills and stars above. The same sky that had guided runaways long ago. He had traced those same constellations, whispered the same prayers under his breath. But now, doubt gnawed at him, because something was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. He should have been breaking loose from a plantation, making his way to north to freedom, but there was no plantation. There was no South, no underground railroad. Only Washington. Only 2035. And yet, it felt like something out of the old history book. The crack of the whip traded for the hiss of a stun rifle. The bounty hunters now dressed in black body armor with insignias he couldn't make out in the dark. He called them race soldiers because that's what they were. Men paid to keep people like him in line. Men who believed the final stage wasn't just necessary, but inevitable. The necessary restructuring of the labor force, they called it. That's what they told them when the first round of detention started. The farms needed workers. The economy needed stability. The people needed order. But he had seen what happened to those who stopped asking questions. The one who accepted the new rules, the labor camps weren't for work, they were for control. And the moment they scanned his ID, the moment they checked the database and saw his name flagged in red, he would never see the outside world again. He wasn't running for freedom. He was running for his life. The ridge came into view and the land dropped steeply into the stream below. He could just make the jump. The water would carry him far enough away to buy time. But before he could move, the night exploded in white light. The race soldiers were already there, waiting. He skidded to a halt as the first one stepped forward, the glow of his visor illuminating a pale, scarred face. The man smirked, raising his rifle with practiced ease. "You really thought you could run, boy?" He didn't answer. The pendant in his pocket was warm now, pulsing with light only he could see. He didn't know what he had. He didn't know what it was. But if he was going down, he sure as hell wasn't going alone. The final stage, part 2, the price of running. The moment the race soldier lifted his rifle, he moved. He threw himself backward off the ridge, just as the shot cracked through the air. The force of the blast sent heat racing past his cheek, close enough to burn. Then, impact. His body struck the water, the cold like a slap to the chest. The current pulled him under, silencing the world above. His lungs screamed, his arms flailed, but he forced himself still. Let the river do its work. If they thought he was dead, they might stop looking. Or they might keep searching just to be sure. He let the current drag him downstream until his fingers found something. Roots, thick, tangled. He gripped them and pulled himself towards the bank, slipping into the shadows beneath the undergrowth. Above, the race soldiers cursed, shouting orders, their flashlights sweeping over the water. "He's gone! No way he survived that drop! Keep the drones on him! If he resurfaces, I want him processed immediately!" He didn't breathe until the voices faded. Then he crawled from the water, shaking, half drowned but alive. He staggered forward, gripping a low branch to steady himself. The wet fabric of his shirt clung to him. His ribs ached from the fall, but he didn't stop moving. He had to keep going. He had to get north. The last 10 years. They had all thought it was just talk at first. When President Michael Abernathy won the 2024 election, people told themselves things couldn't get worse. That the racism, the hate speech, the crackdowns on protesters were just campaign tactics, a show for the voters. Then the real work began. First, they targeted the activists. Anyone who had been part of a movement, anyone who had spoken out too loudly, too clearly, they were labeled agitators, then terrorists. Bank accounts were frozen, travel restricted, employers encouraged to cut ties. The first wave of arrests came soon after, but people still called it law and order. Then the digital tagging began. Under the guise of security, the government rolled out racial threat assessments. Every black person in America had a classification, buried in some database, cross-referenced with their online activity, job history, even their DNA markers, potential disruptors, moderate risk citizens, dangerous non-compliant individuals. No one knew exactly what list you were put on, but if you were on it, your life was no longer your own. Then the workforce reform started. By 2028, unemployment had reached record highs, and the government claimed black communities were suffering most. Their solution? A temporary work program that mandated employment for national stability. If you couldn't prove a job, they assigned you one. If you didn't show up, you disappeared. People tried to fight it. They marched, they wrote, they spoke. Then the race soldiers came. By 2030, the detainment centers were functioning openly. They weren't called prisons, not officially. They were stability zones meant to help integrate displaced citizens into the economy. That's when he knew. That's when they all knew. This wasn't about jobs. This wasn't about safety. It was the final stage. And by the time the rest of the world started asking questions, it was too late. A path north. He moved through the trees, sticking to the shadows. Every mile north was another chance, another stretch of road between him and the camps, between him and the race soldiers. Elijah had told him there was still a way out. If you can't make it past the Cascades, past the safe cities, where there's still a place for us. He wasn't sure if it was true, but he had nothing left to lose. As he had climbed higher into the hill, the pendant in his pocket pulsed again. He pulled it out, watching the faint blue light flicker in his palm. He still didn't know what it was, only that it had answers. And if he could make it north, he might live long enough to find out what they were. The final stage, part 3, lessons in the smoke. He moved through the trees, the damp earth soft beneath his feet. The wind carried the scent of pine and distant rain, but beneath it, he could still smell the smoke. The burning cities, the scorched fields, where people once worked. Everything had changed. But the truth was, it hadn't changed overnight. His fingers curled around the pendant in his pocket. It was still warm, pulsing faintly, like it was breathing. It had to mean something. Had to be proof of what was happening. But who could he even show it to? He had to keep moving. There were still safe houses, whispers of people helping others out of the stability zones. He had traded stories with those who were still free. Maybe find someone who could explain what this thing was. As he moved, his thoughts drifted to his father. Flashback. The sound of steel and gunpowder. Crack, crack, crack. The shots echoed across the field, ringing sharp against the late afternoon sky. His father stood steady, rifle pressed tight against his shoulders, eyes locked on the empty can lined up on the fence post. One by one they fell, clinking against the dirt, rolling into the dry grass. He'd always thought it was funny, the way his father prepared for something that would never come. "Why you doing all this shooting?" I asked, leaning against the porch rail. His father didn't look at him. He just reloaded, chambered another round. "Gotta protect my family and home when they come." He scoffed, shaking his head. "Who you talking about?" His father finally turned, rested the butt of the rifle against his hip. His eyes were hard, distant, like he had already seen the future unfolding. "You know who," he said. "The official boys. When they come and try and take you and your mama from me." He had laughed back then. Laughed. He thought his father was just one of those men always waiting for a fight that wasn't coming, stocking up on canned goods, building generator in the shed like the world was ending. But he was right. The fall, how it all started. He hadn't been at the farm when it happened, when the first stability zones went up. At first, didn't seem like much, just another land buyout. The big corporations had been swallowing up farms for years, pushing people out with the rising cost and the empty promises. But that wasn't just some agribusiness takeover. It was FEMA. They came in fast. The place where he used to work, the fields he walked every day, was fenced off, repurposed. He thought it was just another relocation project, another temporary housing camp for displaced workers. But then the fences got higher, the security got heavier, and the people who went in, they didn't come back. He had stayed long enough to watch the whole thing unfold. The government called it an emergency stability effort, said it was about to keep people safe after the catastrophe. A catastrophe that they never fully explained. All he knew was that one day things were bad. The next day the government declared an emergency, and after that, every black man, woman, and child who didn't have a government-issued work permit started disappearing. He had gotten out before they came for him, but not before he saw what was inside the encampment. Rows of barracks, reinforced with metal siding, armed guards standing at every checkpoint, a train line stretching deep into the compound, bringing people in, but never taking them out. This wasn't a shelter. It wasn't a work program. It was a machine. A system built to contain, control, and erase. And he wouldn't have been in it, just like the rest of them, if he hadn't run. If Elijah hadn't pulled him out before they shut the gates for good. The present. Weight of the truth. He clenched the pendant tighter, feeling its pulse match his own. His father had been right. He had laughed at the old man's paranoia, thought he was just another conspiracy theorist with a shotgun and a grudge against the government. But now he wished he had listened sooner. The truth was burning in his chest, rising up like bile. He wanted to scream, to shout at the top of his lungs, but who would listen? The world had already moved on. The government had scrubbed the history books clean, filled the news cycles with stories of economic recovery and national unity. If you asked the right people, They would tell you that things were better now. That the new laws, the new camps, the stability zones were necessary. But those who disappeared were just collateral damage. But he knew better. He had seen what they were doing, and now he had proof. His father had taught him how to survive, but he had never thought he'd be running like a slave in his own country, in his own time. 2035 wasn't supposed to look like 1855. But here he was, running north, just like the ones before him. Final stage, part 4. The woman who played dead. The fire was dying now, crackling low against the damp air. He sat close to the warmth, eyes half closed, body aching from the miles he had put behind him. But his mind wouldn't rest. The pendant in his pocket pulsed again, faint and steady, like a second heartbeat. He turned it over in his hands, watching the soft glow between his fingers. The thing led him this far, had kept him moving, kept him alive, and now it had led him to her. She sat across from him, wrapped in a warm, gray coat that swallowed her thin frame. Her hair was matted with dust, her face streaked with dried blood that wasn't hers. She had given him no name, just a story. One that he still wasn't sure he believed. "How'd you make it out?" he asked when she first found him. And she smiled. Not the kind of smile that meant something was funny, but the kind that gave you the sense that she had seen too much and had nothing left to lose. "I played dead." The raid. She told him how they came in the night. "Didn't even knock," she muttered, eyes distant staring in the fire. "Just came in like they owned the place. Drones first, sweeping the streets, scanning faces, then the boots, lots of them. They had locked down the whole block, street by street, building by building. Said it was a housing compliance check," she spat. "That's what they always say." The neighbors believed it at first. They thought it was just another survey, another bureaucratic procedure, another hoop you gotta jump through in this new world. Until the soldiers started calling out names. "They already knew what they wanted," she whispered. "Had their names, their locations, everything, all official, all printed neat on some damn list. Families didn't even have time to run, didn't have time to fight. The ones who struggled were handled first. Stun rifles, plastic ties around the wrist, bag over the head. They kept saying it was temporary, that they were being relocated for security processing. But she knew better. She had heard about the other places, the neighborhoods that were silent, the streets where people walked to work one morning and never came home. So when the first shots rang out, she didn't run. She dropped to the ground, let the rubble cover, let the dust settle in her hair, force herself to breathe shallow, stay still. And when the screams stopped and the boots marched away, taking her neighbors with them, she stayed down. "Hours," she whispered. "I laid there for hours. Could feel the bodies next to me, could smell the blood. And then, when it was quiet, when the drones faded and the street lights flickered back on, she crawled free, alone." What she had heard? They talked while they worked. She said, wrapping her arms around herself, "Didn't care if anybody heard. Hell, maybe they wanted us to." He leaned forward. "What did they say?" She glanced at him, brow furrowed, testing him. "You already know, don't you?" He swallowed. He did. But he needed to hear it from someone else. Say it anyway. She exhaled, watching the fire dim to embers. "They called it a final sweep. Said our district had reached its compliance threshold. That meant whoever was left didn't belong. His fingers clenched around the pendant. A final sweep? It was happening faster now. And the camps, he said, low voice, they take them to the stability zones? She gave a short, hollow laugh. They still calling them that, she muttered. Yeah, some of them, but not all. His stomach twisted. What do you mean? She hesitated. I heard one of the officers ask if they were still processing. The other one laughed, said camps were at capacity, said they didn't have time for processing anymore. She met his gaze, her face unreadable. You know what that means, don't you? He didn't answer. Because he did. He wasn't sure he wanted to say it out loud. What now? The fire burned low. The night stretched quiet around them, but the silence wasn't peace. It was waiting. She was watching him now, eyes sharp. You have something, don't you? She asked. Something important. His hands tightened around the pendant. He thought of Elijah, of his father, of the people who weren't here anymore, the people who should be. Yeah, he said softly, I think I do. She nodded like she already knew. Then we have to go north, he nodded back, because there is no other choice. The final stage, part 5, the trickster's game. The forest was silent, save for the soft rustle of leaves underfoot. He and the woman, still strangers in many ways, pressed on, driven by a shared need to escape the horrors behind them. The pendant in his pocket pulsed gently as a constant reminder. As they navigated through the dense underbrush, a faint glow of fire caught their attention. Approaching cautiously, they found him near a hollowed-out tree, crouched by a small fire that cast flickering shadows against the night. Well, well, he said, tilting his head as they approached. His voice was smooth and almost inviting. Didn't expect company, but ain't about to turn away good folks in times like these. The woman stiffened, but he only smiled and raised his hands in a gesture of peace. Sit, he said, nodding towards the fire. Y'all look like you've been through hell. Ain't no law says a man can't warm his bones before heading back into it. A tin pot sat nestled in the coals, something hot and steaming inside. A makeshift satchel lay open beside him, revealing strips of dried meat, a canteen of water, and a crust of bread. Gone now, he said, cutting a piece of bread and holding it out. Ain't poison, I swear it on my mama's grave. The man hesitated. The woman did too. But the hunger that gnawed at their insides and the fire was warm, so they sat and they ate. That was their first mistake. The trickster's mirror. He watched them carefully as they ate, mirroring their movements, their tones. If they sat stiff, he sat stiff. If they relaxed, just a little, he leaned back, rolling his shoulders as if to see. Ain't nothing to be afraid of. Times like these, gotta look out for each other, he said. The woman's eyes narrowed. And you're just out here alone, looking out for people? He gave a small chuckle, shaking his head. Nah, darling, I ain't stupid. Had a group once. Things got bad. People got desperate. You know how it goes. She glanced at the man beside her. He knew what she was thinking because he was thinking it too. They had seen what desperation looked like. You don't seem too desperate, the man said carefully. The trickster smiled. That's because I'm prepared. The way he said it made something tighten in the man's gut. Prepared how? The trickster leaned forward, poking at the fire with a stick. The flames flared up, casting deep shadows across his face. By paying attention. And then, because his ego wouldn't let him stop, he started talking. And what he said chilled them both. to the bone. A plan laid bare. "Y'all ever wonder how we got here?" he asked, glancing up. They didn't answer, but he didn't need 'em to. Most folks thinks it's just happened, that one day the world fell apart and boom, camps, stability zones, bounty list, all of it. But nah, his lips curled into a smirk. This has been cooking for years. The woman's grip on her bread tightened. "How do you know that?" He chuckled. "'Cause I was paying attention, sweetheart, unlike the rest of y'all." Then, because he wanted them to see how smart he was, because he thought they were already in his pocket, he told them everything. The plan began before they even noticed. It wasn't the catastrophes that made the government turn on him. It was just the excuse. The plan was always there, starting with the data, he said, voice casual. Back in late 2010s and early 2020s, they started tracking folks differently. Social scores, threat levels, little things no one paid attention to. But the real kicker, the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act. The woman inhaled sharply. She knew. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, he grinned. They've been locking people up without trial for years. Just need the right moment to scale it up, and once the national emergency hit, whoop, game on, baby. They were never meant to fight back. They were never meant to disappear. You ever hear about the work programs? Neither of them spoke. Of course you have, he continued, shaking his head. People thought it was just temporary. Just little things settled down, but then they started scooping folks up. Nobody asked questions. They had it sound so reasonable too. Just a little help getting back on your feet. His smirk deepened. Funny thing about help, it sure do look like a lot of cages if you stare at it long enough. The man clenched his jaw. And you, what did you do? The trickster grinned. Simple, he said. I started hunting heads before they could hunt mine. Silence. The fire crackled. The woman went rigid. And then they knew he wasn't like them. He wasn't running. He was a bounty hunter, and he had hunted his own. The pendant's warning. His pulse pounded. His instincts screamed at him to move, but he couldn't tip his hand, not yet. And that's when the pendant vibrated, low, subtle. A voice, quiet, steady, and clear as day, spoke in his inner ear. Do not react. Do not engage. You need to be at the riverbank in 30 minutes. Hand him your hat and ask him to fill it with water. He stiffened. Why, he thought. Because he set you up. The breath left his lungs. He almost looked at him, almost gave it away, but he stopped himself. The woman glanced at him. She could tell something had changed, but she didn't ask. Instead, he nodded slowly. All right, he said. Let's get moving. The setup. The river was quiet. The moon sat high. Silver light rippled over the black water. The trickster named Jeremiah had led the way. Still talking, still too damn confident. Gotta keep hydrated, he said, shaking out his shoulders. Go on, fill up. We got a long night ahead. He pulled off his hat and handed it to Jeremiah. And that was the moment that saved his life. A shot cracked through the air. Jeremiah barely had time to look up before his chest exploded. Blood sprayed. He crumpled, his last breath, nothing but a wet gasp. Then silence. The sniper had been waiting, watching for the hat. In that moment, Jeremiah wasn't the bounty hunter anymore. He was just another body on the ground. The warning. As they ran, breathless and shaking, the pendant pulsed again. Trust is a currency, the voice whispered. Spend it wisely or not at all. The man swallowed hard because in this world, one mistake was all it took. And the next time, they might not be so lucky.